Hello and welcome to episode 260 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Not only is it a nice round number 260, but it is our biggest episode of the year. This is our top 10 games of all time. We have gone through games 50 to 11 previously in the last 4 episodes, but today we are at the top of the mountain. We are at the peak. We are about to summit
and we're
Everest
only halfway
here.
up.
We're only halfway up. No, we're at the top.
No, we're at the top of the mountain and we're only halfway up.
Is this some song lyric or something?
I don't know. I can't explain it to you.
Okay.
I don't understand the kids' lingo these days.
Gotcha. Okay, but yes, this is it. We are going to be going through our top 10 games of all time. As we've done in previous episodes, we're going to try to keep things concise. So once we start talking about a game, we're going to try to keep it to a minute. But since these are our 10 favorite games of all time, I feel like we may be breaking that rule a little bit. But we are going to try to keep things flowing. And the first flower will be Neilan. Neilan, tell us about your 10th favorite game of all time.
Now that's a good name for a plaque.
Flower?
First flower.
Yeah.
Floor. Okay, my 10th favorite game of all time is up 6 spots. So this is a new entry into the top 10. This is Brass Birmingham. This is an excellent game of shared infrastructure where you have effectively a map of Birmingham and you are creating little routes, connecting depots, connecting yourself to coal, connecting yourself to iron in order to provide resources to other players in the hopes that they'll utilize them, because if they utilize them, then they flip down and they're worth victory points at the end of the game. You're also trying to ultimately sell the stuff that you're manufacturing to these sort of exit routes. It in some ways feels a little bit Hansa Teutonica-esque in that you're kind of trying to block other players and you're trying to be the only person that exists along certain routes or the only person that is able to utilize certain parts of the board. But Birmingham specifically versus Lancashire or Original Brass has a lot more of a Euro-y bent. It's like, this is my style of economic game that kind of feels very Euro-y, but still feels very, very interactive and at times really, really harsh. Absolutely adore Brass Birmingham, my 10th favorite game of all time.
Out of curiosity, what has pushed this up your list? Have you got a chance to play it this year?
Yeah, just recent plays of it. This is a game that has an excellent online implementation, but yeah, I want to play this more in person. Just excellent.
Yeah, we should play this more. My 10th favorite game of all time is down 2 spots from last year, but it is our first, at least as my records show, triple crossover.
Ooh.
Nice.
This is Hansa Teutonica. So this is among my favorite. This is my favorite of the dusty old Euros, the very dour looking guy on the front and the various shades of beige board game, but one that is, again, if it was re-released for the first time next year, I think it would absolutely survive in that crowd. We've already talked about Hansa Teutonica quite a bit, but just the thing that I love about it is it takes that idea of trying to get someplace on a board, sort of route building a little bit and trying to get somewhere. But instead of feeling bad when you know you're not going to make it, the idea that if you get bumped, it's actually a benefit. If somebody pushes you out of the way, it actually allows you to add another person on the board. And so there's that benefit of being bumped. And Kellen has mentioned earlier that it gets to the point where you can have your whole game plan be, I'm just going to be the person who gets bumped the entire time and just be the most efficient in terms of getting the greatest number of people out there. It also has the more modern idea of like powers that you can sort of level up. It's got like a sort of a tech tree thing, but all the techs in it are very clear and yet they each do very different things. And just, again, a game that has been around a while and I didn't play it until just a couple years ago and immediately fell in love with it. Hansa Teutonica, my 10th favorite game of all time, down 2 spots, but our first triple crossover.
Hansa T, get in that club. Second door. My number 10 favorite board game of all time. They say that you are the 5 people, I don't know, I'm going to butcher it. You are the 5 people that you know the most, blah, blah, blah. And because the 5 people that I know the most dislike this game, I feel like I'm being gaslit into disliking it more and more, and it just keeps moving down my list. This is Cosmic Encounter. For many years, my favorite board game of all time. And then, like I said, the 5 people that I hang out with the most, Neilan, Mark, Christina, and unmentionable names, I do not like Cosmic Encounter, ergo it is now my number 10. Negotiation is a criminally underused mechanism, and it is at the forefront of most, if not all, of my favorite board games. I absolutely adore Cosmic Encounter. If you want silly party with some dumb powers and the ability to negotiate from various levels of power positions. That is what Cosmic Encounter is, and it presents new situations through the course of the game because there's so many unique alien powers that these type of negotiations that you're able to do are so weird and different, because suddenly you may want to lose a round, or you may just want to be adjacent to someone else who is winning, or you may have a way to use cards to better effect. Cosmic Encounter is perhaps the most legacy game on my list as we start talking about these top 10, like games that are not getting played, but I just can't part with, don't know what to do with. Cosmic Encounter, my 10th favorite board game of all time.
The problem I have with Cosmic Encounter is that I've only played it a couple times, to be clear and to be fair, but I still haven't had that amazing experience. But unlike, I'm going to bring it up here, unlike Inish, where I still haven't had the amazing experience with Inish, I don't believe that I'm going to have the amazing experience with Inish, but I still feel like there is that amazing experience with Cosmic because I can see all the parts there. I can see all the zaniness and the wildness of it, and I can see how it all fit together to have like that amazing experience. I just need to actually have it, and that's the only thing that's eluded me so far.
Yeah, having had amazing games of Cosmic, I do think that we got kind of very unlucky with the time that we attempted to play this altogether. We just, I don't know, a function of setup, or who can say it. It's a game that varies a lot depending on the factions in play. And I would like to return to this with the three of you. Like, I think we could have a great game of this down the line for sure.
Let's do it.
My 9th favorite game of all time has fallen 5 spaces, which is, a fairly big move for the top 10. This is Gloomhaven, and this is one of those things that is purely a function of the fact that I will probably never play Gloomhaven again. And then that's just the reality of having finished a very massive campaign of this. Frosthaven now nipping at my heels.
Ooh.
Gloomhaven, yeah.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
The cold, right?
Exactly. Like Jack Frost.
When you explain it, it's not good.
I'm sorry.
It's nipping at the... Okay.
Jack Frost is nipping at his nose, and
Frosthaven's nipping at my heels.
I was thinking nipping at his nips, and then I'm like, no, that's not right.
That's not how that works. But no, Gloomhaven is great. One thing that also contributes to this a little bit, there was a point in time where I would have said that if you wanted like an epic fantasy role-playing like experience in the box, like Gloomhaven would be it. But that space actually has a lot of competition now in 2022. Stuff like Oathsworn has kind of swooped into the scene and is my current, what's the thing Kellen always says? Game du jour. Soup du jour, exactly. But yeah, Gloomhaven will always live in my mind as have a fantastic experience, just a harder one to recommend in 2022, given what's out there right now.
And that whole legacy thing is so hard to like judge year to year. Like
Absolutely.
Pandemic, the year I played Pandemic Legacy Season 1, it was an incredible experience, but it's so hard with time and knowing, like you said, you're never going to return to it to keep it.
Totally. I actually think even just to that point alone, even for me personally, it's harder to justify saying to someone, hey, let's sit down for this 50 game long campaign, because there are so many other games that are like in that space now competing for that attention.
What is your and your group's mindset or sort of like feeling about Frosthaven?
I've actually not gauged them about that. I know that there was a lot of excitement for it, but we are dead in the middle of Oathsworn right now, which is going to keep us busy for a while, which is a shame because I think there is this sense of like, oh my God, Frosthaven's so close, Frosthaven's so close. I'm still waiting for mine to arrive, but I just don't know. I don't know what the overall like excitement to like break that out and start playing it immediately is.
All right. My 9th favorite game of all time is unchanged. It was 9th last year. And I will say that this is probably the more palatable version of Container that I mentioned earlier. This is The Estates. So The Estates is a game that's also, I think, not for everybody. But in terms of, and I mentioned this before, games that get my heart pounding, Estates for me is number 1. Estates is a game where you're auctioning off building blocks and you're putting them in one of 3 rows. But the twist is that any row that is not completed by the end of the game, and the end of the game is sort of also controlled by the players to some extent, any rows that are not completed by the end of the game will score negative points for their players. So somebody may be building a building that's going to be quite lucrative for them, but if that row is not finished, that lucrative score is actually going to be negative. Adds to a ton of tension to the game. Also, the fact that money is, for the most part, open information, and the fact that it is a closed economy, which is something I love both about Container and about The Estates, where the amount of money in the game can only decrease. There is a ability you have to sort of like siphon off money and count it towards victory points, but just knowing that there's not going to be any hidden surprise, like your stack is your stack of money and your opponent's stack, and there's just a level of brinksmanship in The Estates that is for me, I've not found in any other game. When I think of the estates, I think of those moments where my heart is just thumping in my chest, where like I just feel like everybody around the table can hear it and knows how nervous I am or how tense I am about the next bid and what's going to happen with it. So my 9th favorite game of all time is the estates.
Love the estates. I can see the comparison to Container. I think it's I was going to say friendly. That's not the right word at all. It's a less weird game.
Yeah.
But still that harsh, just like your chance of winning can just go over a cliff in an instant in estates.
Right.
Mark, let me ask you this. What trained you in your real life to be so good at Neuhamat / the estates?
I don't know. Maybe it's the math training thing. Maybe it's like the fact I feel a thrill whenever I fleece a grandma. It translates maybe 1-to-1 with the estates. I just picture everybody around the table. They say to picture everybody, like if you're giving a speech, picture everybody in their underwear so you're not intimidated by them.
Yeah.
I picture everybody in grandma attire. I didn't want to tell you that the first time we played it, but that's actually what I was thinking.
Can you say, for me, capitalism ho with an exclamation on the end of the ho?
Capitalism ho!
And that is why Mark will always be better than you at the estates. Just God. If there's an economy or money, just don't play it with Mark. It's not gonna. He's gonna win. All right. My 9th favorite board game of all time is up from the teens due to some fantastic plays this year. This is Decrypto. This is a crossover with Neilan. What a fantastic word party. And again, I think this is in the scale of parties from Rager to a sitting in a library. Decrypto is definitely the sitting in the library party game where teams are battling it out to communicate with each other with the restriction that the other team is going to be guessing before you get to guess. And so you have some hidden secrets. You can see your words. They can see their words. There's sort of the two-phase, might I call it, two-phase aspect? Not really two phases. There are two things that you're doing at once, which is trying to interpret what they've got going on with less information and then trying to interpret what you've got going on with more information. And that feeling is different, just a little bit different, more wild guesses, more creativity, more speculation on one end, and then a little bit more rigid, ordered, well, if this, then that on your side. It's never missed for me once you get through the rules explanation. My 9th favorite board game of all time, Decrypto.
Decrypto is not on my top 50 list. I don't know if it would ever make it. I don't think it would ever make the highest heights, but the thing that keeps it off the list and keeps it from being maybe in that 30-40 range for me is just whenever I am interested in teaching it, I just know that if I'm not playing with gamers, that teach is going to be difficult. And I always go with the Kellen thing. Kellen's trademarked way to teach Decrypto. Everybody, I know you're going to be confused. Just shut up and we'll play the first round, and trust me, you'll get it after that. That's the way to do it. But it's always just, at least for me, a mental hurdle when playing it with like quote-unquote non-gamers.
Yeah. And I think that's what keeps it from being as accessible, right, as the code names.
For sure.
And so it's like why I think the definition or the name party game, like there is this weird problem, right, where it's like, is this a group of hardcore board gamers who just want a little break? Or is this a group of people that you hardly know that you're trying to ice break with? Or like, could you show up to a house party with Decrypto as your first time with these people? Absolutely not. Do not kill the party with Decrypto. But, if you hear of gamers, they like some word games. They have code names. They probably haven't played Decrypto and they're going to love it. My 9th favorite board game ever.
My 8th favorite game of all time, I was shocked to discover, was also on Kellen's list this year because he rudely decides to play it without me. This is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar.
Oh, I felt so bad, Neilan. Listen, I felt so bad. I felt like I was betraying you. Literally, I said no at first, but then there was some insistence because you have been trying to get me to play this for so long. Anyway, we're going to reset your timer, Neilan, because I felt so bad. We're giving you more time.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Wow, 5 minutes. That seems like a lot, but I'll take it. Tzolk'in's excellent. There was a point in time I would have called this my favorite strategy game. At the time, that Resistance was way up at the top of my list. But it's sort of worker placement, but it doesn't feel like worker placement because it's almost like a brain-burny, forward-planning, logistical nightmare where it's more about setting yourself up for a theoretical turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns down the line, where you're placing workers onto these wheels. Every round they sort of progress slightly, and the actions on those wheels get better and better and better. So the longer you leave your workers unavailable, the better they will be when you eventually take them off the wheels and take an action with them. So it's this delicate balance of putting workers onto these wheels, knowing that they'll be unavailable. And the reason that that's crucial is because you have to take an action every turn, whether it's putting a worker on or taking a worker off. And you have to sort of ride that line of whether putting a worker on now to get a good benefit later is going to play into your future plans turns. You have to be planning out turns in advance. It's also just got a cool visual look, like these wheels with workers on them moving around these action spaces. That is Tzolk'in, the Mayan calendar, my 8th favorite game of all time.
I do need to play Neilan with the expansion, so we could do that, and that could be in similitude of my first play for you.
Have you played with the expansion, Neilan?
I have. I actually don't love the expansion all that much, honestly. Like, doesn't strike me as a necessary expansion by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, adding a 5th player is nice, I suppose, but not something I need most of the time.
My 8th favorite game of all time is down 3 spots from last year, and last year was down a couple spots because it used to be my 2nd favorite game of all time. This is Arboretum. Still absolutely love Arboretum. Got a chance to play it a couple times this year. Absolutely loved it. For those who don't know, Arboretum is a hand management game where you are trying to build these arboretums, these sort of like lines of trees, and you're going to score at the end of the game for the length of the different types of trees that you've built. But the twist is, and the thing that makes Arboretum so great is you only score a color of tree or a suit of tree if at the end of the game you have the most points of that tree in hand. And throughout the entire game, what you've been aiming to do is build out like your blue tree as big as possible to score the most points. But you know that every card that you use for building that scoring opportunity out is another card that is out of your hand and potentially risking the entire scoring option. Like if you don't have the most blue at the end of the game, all that work has been for nothing. The other thing that really makes Arboretum great is that every round you are going to be drawing 2 cards and then playing one and discarding one. And that is a choice that is agonizing because when your opponents draw, they can draw from the pile in the middle or they can draw from any opponent's discard pile. So I've said this before, but Arboretum is a game that makes me feel like every turn my optimal play would be just to pass, because I just feel like anything I do is going to help my opponents. It's either going to give information away about the cards I've been holding, I'm going to aid the colors that they've been searching for because you have a very restricted hand size. Arboretum is just such a great, simple card game that is quite tense. I think that can put a lot of people off because at the end of the game, for all the tenseness that you've been going through, scores in Arboretum can be like 0 to 1 to 3 because everybody's sort of cannibalizing everybody else's ability to score. Just a fantastic, really, really brutal, agonizing game that I love. Arboretum, my 8th favorite game of all time, down 3 spots.
If the card placement in Arboretum was more straightforward, this would be a top 20 game for me.
I can see that.
Easily.
I can see that because that is the one sort of stumbling block when it comes to teaching the game. The rules about how the scoring goes for the trees is a little bit tricky. For sure.
It's one twist too far for my little brain. All right, my 8th favorite board game of all time. I'm going to start this by saying we are all going to die. Right? And if there was one game that I would tell everyone that they have to play before that sad thing happens, death, I would say that you must try Diplomacy. Diplomacy is a cultural institution. It is a very long, very straightforward game of negotiation. And this is how much, Mark, I don't care. I don't even remember like what conflict it's modeling in the base game. I know their countries, post-Victorian Europe, cooperate and clash to become the master of the continent. And in this game, you are having periods of time where you leave the table, you make as many exotic deals as you want, a la like a game show like Survivor or a reality competition, and then you come back to the table and you turn in your orders. Whatever you wrote on your paper is what happens. It's very simple. It's like Risk if each spot had one piece on it. You're moving stuff around in the water, on the land, and you will have a headache by the time you finish Diplomacy. You will have lost friends. You will have people who are legitimately mad at each other. This is more of a lifestyle game. I kind of see this in a similar realm to Blood on the Clock Tower, which hurts coming out of my mouth. But for those who truly love cutthroat, Blood on the Clock Tower inspires those mini groups of people that are off to the side. Why is Neilan and Mark talking again after this round? And what can I do about it? Should I just go stand by them and say, hey, might I stand here? Diplomacy is something that it's like I'm imagining this future state where I have children, right? Like, can you imagine I force all my children to just play diplomacy with me? My God, that would be incredible. So my wish to you listeners is if you have a chance to play diplomacy, and again, maybe not worth it with total randos, right? There's something really, really interesting and unique about a game night of diplomacy where it's just like, and honestly, like I've started to feel bad. I don't know that I love play. I feel really, really horrible about portraying people in diplomacy now, but it is just something that I can't get away from just including here. It's just one of the best experiences outside of board gaming. So unique. You'll never get it anywhere else unless you get cast on Survivor, I suppose. That is Diplomacy, my 8th favorite board game of all time.
I don't remember you feeling bad about betraying me when we played Diplomacy, Kellen.
I do feel bad. I
definitely remember Kellen feeling bad about betraying me in Diplomacy when we got a chance to play it.
Dude, you got...
I was about to say that you had no reason to feel bad, but now you're going to rub it in. No, I need to play this again. I didn't have a great game of it, but I did have a good experience. Even though I was the first nation out and I got backstabbed, it wasn't a terrible experience. The result was on paper very, very bad, but I did like it. And it is unlike, I would say, Kellen says it's unlike anything, and I agree with that. But I do think that you can find an analogy, or you can find some shared DNA with another type of game that people aspire to play, which are mega games. There is a mega game aspect to diplomacy where there is like where your physical body is part of the game. As Kellen was saying, like you can like convince people to, hey, let's talk in the corner here and like make sure that Kellen isn't listening or Neilan isn't listening and whatever, which you do get out of mega games. And so if you're looking for a mega game sort of experience, I think diplomacy can scratch that itch at least a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. I think it's just diplomacy has reduced the rules to like a clean, solid game, and a mega game is like the exact opposite of that. But you're right that some of those feelings come through in mega game experiences, definitely.
With a mega game, you have like sort of usually have like a moderator or something trying to make sure the experience is like as fun for all the people as possible, and that can add a lot of like grayness. It's a little bit of a Blood on the Clock Tower, like, wait, is this a game, is this role playing, whatever. Whereas diplomacy, it's like very stark, very cut and dried as to like what the rules are and what's going to happen if things happen.
My 7th favorite game of all time is, bar none, the best team-based tactical game that I've ever played. This is Gods of Atlantis 2. This is the first year that I'm including the official sequel. This is now being released after a hugely successful Kickstarter, and I am so pleased to discover that the production on this is exceptional. The quality of the cards and the art and the redone graphic design in Gods of Atlantis 2, and the way that all of the cards have now been balanced around giving even what used to be your basic do nothing action is now a unique minor ability for all characters. There are so many fun subtle changes, but most importantly, a lot of thought and care and attention has been given to reducing the game length. I think Gods of Atlantis, if it did have one major downside, was the length of the game. Gods of Atlantis 2 gets you into the action quicker and steepens the experience curve, so you're getting cool abilities faster, and the game proceeds to a very rapid conclusion, very, very tense conclusion, very, very quickly. Wonderful production, an excellent game, and this is, by almost every metric, a huge improvement over the original, which was already in my top 10 year over year over year. That is Gods of Atlantis 2, my 7th favorite game of all time. I'm always, always itching to play a game of this. There's no point in time where I would ever say no to Gods of Atlantis 2.
I feel like this is a game you actually, like, kidding aside, should bring to Dice Tower West, because I really do want to play this. I wasn't as steeped in these whole MOBA games. I was aware of them, but I didn't really know like a lot about them. But I love team games. I love the games that like sort of model sports because I'm a big sports fan. And the way that this really felt like a team game, really I enjoyed that a great deal. And it was a game where I could tell I was like the weakest player because I wasn't aware of like some of the MOBA ideas, but instead of like pushing me away, it really made me want to get better at it. And I don't feel that in a lot of games. A lot of games, if I don't gel with them, I get turned off. But the game was so well done that it really made me want to play more and get better at it.
One thing that I didn't mention, which it actually might even aid your second impression of it, Mark, because dying in the first game also felt like more harsh than it does in Gods of Atlantis 2. You just get back into the action quicker. So in some ways also smooths over the things that are just considered staples of the video game genre.
Right. Okay.
In terms of just being very, very punishing. You still want to avoid dying at every cost in Gods of Atlantis 2, but it does make it a little bit less harsh in that regard. Yeah, solid changes all around.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very eager to play this. My 7th favorite game of all time is my highest party game, and it is also a double crossover with the Red Tank himself. This is Time's Up. Your mileage may vary. I have already talked about the fact that when we play Time's Up, it becomes like a Sharks versus Jets thing for all you West Side Story fans, where it's like a battle to the death. And Kellen has talked about how you want to convince your teammates that they should be happy that you're on their side. But you can also play this game much more casually. This is a game that's been called, I think, Salad Bowl. Monikers is a take on it. But a game that no matter how competitive you play it, and again, we play it mostly competitively, but I've played it in non-competitive situations, is always just a blast. I think I literally have never had a game of Time's Up that wasn't just a fantastic experience. My favorite party game by far, that is Time's Up. No change from last year, by the way, where it was also 7th.
Time's up. See what I did there? All right, my 7th favorite board game of all time came out in the year 1979. Okay? So, does that make it older than you, Mark?
It depends on what month. It's close.
Oh, dear. Well, I don't have that knowledge on hand because this is 10 years before I was born.
Good God.
Think about that, Mark.
I tried not to.
This is Dune. This is so amazing that it's hard to know where to focus your time on. This is the best sandbox board game experience that exists. This game allows you to recreate a novel. It allows you to have the craziest alliances with wildly asymmetric powers, where you never thought that alliance could work, and yet it does. It has thrilling betrayals, crazy card play. It's a miracle that it all works together. Really, truly a miracle. If you are colicky to VGL, as we defined last episode, variable game length, you may have a problem with Dune because it could be over in an hour and it could be over in 6 hours. I've had it go before, just the nature of winning on your own or winning with others. I have to, confess, I love Dune, love the novels, love the movie, love everything in this universe, but there is a sandbox here that it just has so many moments where board gamers are like, that can't be balanced, that can't be balanced, that can't be balanced, and yet somehow it is. Dune is a bona fide classic, one that is older than Mark, so that's how you know it stood the legacy of time. My 7th favorite board game of all time, Dune.
I feel like this is a theme with Kellen's top games where I know that they're good and I want to play them again, but our first plays have been a little stuttering for me. So yeah, a one that again, it's so wild. The different faction abilities are so crazy. I just love how, is it the Bene Gesserit faction that has the ability to actually write down information?
No. That's you mean write down
the Atreides.
Atreides can write down like information about the cards that are coming.
Yeah, that's one of the faction powers. It's just so great. I just love it. I love all that about it. Our first game of it was a little bit of a stalemate affair, but a game that I definitely want to play again for sure.
I think interestingly, despite like how awry that game went, it still left a really, really strong impression on me. Like just seeing how wild all of the different abilities that each of the factions has and like how strongly you have to lean into them to do effectively was just kind of a joy. And like also, I know that this is not as much of a setting point for Kellen specifically, but like how thematically strong the game is huge if you're a fan of the property. It feels like you're playing Dune for all intents and purposes.
I think that I aspire to not be influenced by the theme, but like you can't, that's why I publicly sort of declared my love so people can judge me for it. Because this A War of the Ring is a good game, even if it doesn't have Lord of the Rings. We've all heard it too many times before. Get in the back of the line, Neilan.
My 6th favorite game of all time is one of my absolute favorite party games. I will counter Kellen and say that this is actually the best drawing party game. This is Pictomania. This is a double crossover with Mark, which is appropriate because I don't think the competition gets any more heated than when Mark and I are playing Pictomania together. This is a stressful drawing game. Think of playing Pictionary, but instead of just drawing or just guessing, you're doing both at the same time. I've really turned around on the second edition of this game. I think it makes some smart rule changes, and actually I will 180 on things I may have said in the past. I think condensing the cards down to just 3 trays actually gives you some very interesting, just like being at cross purposes with other players on almost every single round in a way that feels really, really fun. It gets the box size down. It makes it just slightly cleaner and an excellent way to play that if you've never played Pictomania before. What a fantastic but very stressful game. I get that this won't be for everyone, but this is my go-to drawing game.
Let me ask you something, Neilan.
Please.
Why does everything have to be a competitive experience? You're taking something beloved, drawing and laughing with your friends, and you're tryharding the ever-living out of it in Pictomania. How do you feel about that, Neilan?
Yeah, why would you poison that experience, Neilan?
Yeah, exactly. I get you. I'm not even going to jokingly respond to that. There is something that is lovely about telestrations, and turning it into something that feels bad to play shouldn't feel so good to me, but it does. It's just great. I just love how often you're just stepping on each other's toes and making bad choices and instantly regretting them in Pictomania.
It is writing a really interesting line, right? And I think the publisher and designer said, oh, this actually could work for a more mass audience in the design of the second edition, and a lot of love for this. I feel like the love just continues, not from you, but just in the ether.
Kellen, you mentioned the designer of the game. Who's the designer again?
Vlada Chivaltal.
Yep.
Is that close?
I mean, I prefer that you're farther away, actually, to be honest with you. But I'm curious, Neilan, that you have turned around on the second edition. I remember playing that second edition one time and not enjoying it as much as the first edition, so I should probably dive back into seeing what the differences are. But yeah, I'm happy to hear that you enjoy it more.
Yeah, it's really subtle, to be honest. But what struck me as strictly worse changes on my first impression, I've definitely come around on.
Great. I'd love to hear that. My 6th favorite game of all time is down 4 spots. So this was new to the list last year, and this was my 2nd favorite game of all time last year. It is by far the game that I've played more than any game ever, for sure. This is Race for the Galaxy, the Tom Lehman design. I think part of the reason why it's dropped 4 spaces, just because I've played it so much. I have played Race for the Galaxy probably over 400 times at this point. I went from 0 to 60 on Race for the Galaxy, unlike any other game I've ever played. I think it is a complete triumph of game design, almost unlike any other game. The idea that Lehman also used with San Juan, where the cards function as both the cards that you play in your tableau, but also as the currency, is an amazing, simple design choice. Also, the fact that you can play the game in so many different ways. There are so many paths to victory in so many ways that the cards combo. It's just so much game in such a little package, and there's been some talk recently about what the best play count is. I've said earlier that I think the game sort of falls off a cliff going from 2 players to 3 players, and we've had a lot of pushback on the Discord, and so I will definitely concede that it's my playing style, or the way that I've just played so many 2-player games, that is coloring it for me, and 3 may be a better count. But for me, when it comes to the arena of 2-player games, I can't think of many that I would play, certainly more than Race for the Galaxy, but that are just better, tighter experiences. I know there's a little bit of a learning curve because of all the symbology, but once you get over that, games of Race for the Galaxy can be 5-10 minutes, and each time you come up with these different combinations, and you have to counteract what your opponents are doing, and you have to sort of second guess what they're picking because of the way that you can follow and piggyback off of their action selection choices. Just such an incredible design. My 6th favorite game of all time, down 4 spots, and probably only because I've played it so much. Race for the Galaxy.
It's interesting you brought up the player count thing, Mark, because one of the benefits of this not being in the same block of records as that previous one is I've also been paying attention to that discussion about how maybe 3-player is a lot of people's preferred way to play the 2-player, which kind of actually maybe gave me the impression that I don't necessarily need to revisit Race in 2-player to change my mind about it, as it were.
Look, I will still stand by the fact that I'm not as experienced with 2-player Race for the Galaxy as other people, and they could be right that it's just as good. It may be just as good 3-player, but it feels so different 2 to 3 players. I would say you should definitely revisit it a couple times. It's so fast. Like once you get over the learning curve of learning how to like the symbols mean, and that is aided to a great deal by BGA and their implementation because you can just hover over and find out. But the 2-player game, you have so much more control, and it can be a little more heads down, but it feels so different. I would definitely encourage you to give it a shot.
You know what? I could buy that. If it feels very different at 2, then that alone maybe makes it worth me reconsidering it at that count.
I would say that even the people who are supporters of the 3 versus 2-player count, I think even they would have to concede that it feels very different at 2 versus 3.
Are you using expansions yet, Mark?
I have played with every expansion at this point. There are 3 arcs, basically. There are 3 sets of expansions you can play with. I still prefer the original set of expansions. I think that the base game is, I mean, I think you get 50, 60 games of enjoyment for sure of just the base game. And I think some expansions are like a little too crazy. They introduce like maps and stuff like that, and it's just like not what you want from Race. But those first couple expansions that just include more cards and a couple twists on the original like base set is just really where it's at. Like that's the perfect amount of expansion to a Race.
Cool. Well, I will continue the train of cards based gameplay. I would say I would wear a t-shirt that says cards are better than boards. And I don't know if that's a really nerdy t-shirt to wear. Maybe the cards greater than but not equal to boards. In all places I prefer cards. Have I made that clear? And this for me is one of 2 Carl Chudiak games on this list. This is Glory to Rome. And it's funny because Glory to Rome, Innovation, and Race for the Galaxy, I think about often in the same sentence as sort of, or in the same breath of different twists on not the same thing because they're pretty different experiences, but for some reason, I guess they are complicated, under an hour for sure, card-based games that have a lot going on that mirror or emulate some of these bigger brethren in the board game realm, but they're all with cards. And again, cards are greater than boards. Glory to Rome steals some systems, I believe, from Race for the Galaxy, from Puerto Rico, these sort of follow mechanism, and puts them in just a fabulous experience where you are building Rome. You really can't buy this anymore, unfortunately, but you can buy Matainai, which I know is a growing group of people who really, really enjoy Matainai. And Matainai is a game that I have rebought to try again. It is a rethemed, shorter length version of Glory to Rome. Again, Glory to Rome is a 45-minute game, but it's a 25-minute version that thematically isn't as fun. But if you're interested in weird card games, you should definitely seek out either Glory to Rome or Matainai.
For what it's worth, I think you can count me in the camp of thinking that Glory to Rome feels much better than Matainai, and I think it is a function of the theme, honestly. Like, I don't think the Matainai theme makes any sense, but there's something that just feels easier to grapple with the way that Glory to Rome is presented.
I love Glory to Rome. What stupid powers. And it's like, I think what's interesting, Mark, right, is that Race for the Galaxy, the thing that you're cutting out of it by playing it at 2 players is the sort of having to understand exactly what your opponents are going to do, right? Because you have more control. It's reducing that part of it where you really have to ride the wave in a game like Glory to Rome in order to succeed, which is to figure out what other people are invested in and follow them at the appropriate time.
This feels like a big time grower for you. Do you know if it's...
yeah, so it's from the mid...
It
was 15 or 16 last year, so definitely moved into the top 10. Again, I think of this as a older, more straightforward cousin to my favorite board game that works at higher player counts but doesn't lose the plot in terms of game time. So if we had a nice night where we wanted to play something with substance, but it wasn't going to take too long, Glory to Rome might be the first game that I pull out looking at the rest of my top 10 and just say, yeah, we're going to all really like this, but it isn't going to be a 2-hour experience.
Right.
That is my 6th favorite board game of all time, the criminally out of print Glory to Rome.
My 5th favorite game of all time is a double crossover with Kellen. This is the Resistance Avalon. So this used to be my favorite game a few years ago. I think this is similar to what I was saying about Gloomhaven earlier in the episode. It's just not a game that, by virtue of the fact that I have played this and almost ridiculous number of times in the last 10 years, but not so much recently. It's not my go-to social deduction most of the time, but still one that I'm still always pitching to play. I think, honestly, the reason that I didn't get played that much, I think a lot of the enthusiasm for it by other people in my circle has dramatically decreased, but I would still never be mad to be playing a game of the Resistance Avalon. Fantastic social deduction game. Very, very pure. Gets rid of a lot of the things I think maybe irk people about stuff like Blood on the Clock Tower, where all you have is a subset of very simple roles and nothing but kind of your wits and sort of social maneuvering. Avalon is, like Kellen said last episode, my favorite way to play this. I think that the Merlin role, the assassin role, make this really shine. You can reproduce that for what's worth if you prefer the dystopian theme by getting the Hidden Agenda expansion for Base the Resistance. But that is The Resistance, my 5th favorite game of all time.
All social deduction games are the same, and Neilan is too busy playing Blood on the Clock Tower to hang out with his Arturian friends. I believe that. I know you're laughing at my joke, but I just want to confirm for the record that I believe what I just said.
I mean, I do think there's nothing to the idea that, like, yeah, at this point in time, if I was going to be pitching a social deduction game to play, it would be Blood on the Clock Tower, which is a part of the reason why...
Did I leave that? Did I give that back to you, by the way?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so.
I thought I brought it back with me. Let me check my closet.
Yeah.
This is all when I'm breaking and entering.
I've not seen it, so unless you left it somewhere out of the way.
I'll look in my closet. We can just make sure, as Neilan is desperate to hang out with me now that he's back in America.
If only just to get my Blood on the Clock Tower back from you.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I wasn't laughing at that. I was laughing at the joke that I was trying to build here, which was some sort of like analogy between Arthurian legend, which happens in England, and what happens in my 5th favorite game of all time, which also takes place in England. This is Brass. So I was thinking about that English connection. I was laughing in advance at how funny the joke was going to be. You ruined it now. So this is a double crossover with Neilan. He brought up Brass, Birmingham. I'm going to say Lancashire is my favorite of the two, but I don't think you go wrong either way. I think Brass, Birmingham is a little bit more tactical, where I think Lancashire, which is the original, is a little more strategic, but I'm happy to play both. I love the shared infrastructure when it comes to Brass. That is the thing about it for me, where you are building coal mines and breweries in the case of Birmingham, or tin deposits, but your goal is to have these coal mines and tin deposits or whatever exhausted, and that's the only way that they're going to score, once all the coal or all the tin has been used up. And so you're okay having your opponents, even though often you'll want to be the one to use that coal or use that tin, you're not really upset when other people do, because they are sort of forwarding your end to having these tiles exhausted and then flipped for the victory points. That shared infrastructure thing is so cool to me. The other thing I really like about Brass, and this is like a minor thing, is the idea that round per round, the turn order is based on the amount that you spent in the last round. So the person who spends the most round to round goes last in turn order, and the person who spent the least goes first. Even the thematic part of, like, being more agile in business. Like if you make a big expenditure in business, you're sort of slower to move. That's the way I've always sort of thought about it thematically, but it's just a little interesting twist. And by the designer, who is full of interesting twists, Martin Wallace, just I think his greatest design ever, Brass. And you can't go wrong either with Lancashire, which is a little more strategic, or Birmingham, which is a little more tactical. Both great games. 5th favorite game of all time, up 1 spot from last year.
I'm surprised you got through all of that and didn't mention that it's a two-phase game, Mark.
That's true. You're right. Yes, a very, very important part of it being a two-phase game, yeah. We should figure out whatever website you played it on and played, because I am done.
Absolutely, yeah.
This game.
All right, we're getting into the top 5 favorite board games of all time. And what I will say is I am starting from a premise that Mark and Neilan definitely agree with. And that premise is that Euros are boring. And so that's, Mark said it first, not me. So just remember that for anyone who wants to write email to boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. Euro games.
The statements of Kellen Laker do not reflect the statements of Mark, Neilan, or Board Game Barrage as an entity or as a whole.
Do not give them my email address, first of all. And what do you do to a Euro game to make it fun, right? To get rid of the boring. Arboretum. I think that's how you say that. Let me just make sure.
What are you saying?
I think I'm just saying boring in Spanish, but I want to make sure that I'm not just saying like, yeah, there we go. Arboretum. Okay, this was a 1-minute introduction to Trois, the best Euro game of all time, the Euro game that makes Euro games fun. It adds so many silliness. It's so interactive. It's so, first of all, everyone has a unique end game scoring condition, and you are scored by everyone's card and not just your own. That is hilarious. You are constantly paying attention. Wait a minute, is this a game where I need a lot of money? Why is Mark hoarding money? You combine that with a really fun card system where each card is popping off other cards. Cards are getting you more dice, and those dice are going into different machines. It is also very tactical, right? You can't plan out everything. You can't be a Neilan in this game and say, well, if I do this for the first 17 turns, on turn 20, I'm going to score 80% of my points. You don't have that ability because you don't even know the combos for the third round of the game. The game forces you to play tactically. Not to mention, obviously, the thing I mention every time, you buy each other's dice. You think that it's cheaper to use your own, and it's really funny to steal from other players. The cool options radically go away really quickly in a new round of Trois. This is one that I just can't get enough of. I love the combos. I love playing it with people. I love how interactive it is. It's a lot. You know, it is a thing. Trois, my favorite Euro game ever, 5th favorite board game of all time. They're speechless. They love it so much.
I mean, Trois is a game where it's like, just the whole does not feel like the sum of its parts to me. And I know I'm wrong. I know that there's so much acclaim for Trois that I must be doing it wrong. But every time I play Trois, I'm excited for that incredible experience, and every time it just feels like, oh, this is all really good and all very interesting, but it's just never come together for me quite yet. I don't know what it is.
There is something that is really lovely that I'd like to see a lot more games use, which is just dice are the fundamental actions in the game, and being able to buy them from other players is like the thing that makes Trois really work. And it's just something that can feel so like gutting when someone takes a die, even if they've taken it at a huge cost and giving you money for it, that you desperately need on your turn for like one critical action at like the last possible moment.
I do love the shared hidden end goals, though. That is one thing that I've always loved with Trois. Like the fact that you have to try to suss out, like a lot like Archipelago, I have to figure out what players are going for and what the scoring condition is that is going to be applicable to you solely based on the way they're playing. I've always loved that.
My 4th favorite game of all time is our second triple crossover. This is Time's Up. I almost feel bad like including this game sometimes by virtue of the fact that, you know, it has all these different derivatives. It's very much just like a folk game that's been sort of repackaged in multiple ways. But there is something that is just so singular about like how much I love this game every single time I play it, and how it gets everyone, as we've mentioned multiple times already, just like so tense and so competitive, while just being like some of the most absolute fun you can have in a large group, in a group of people you know, in a group of people you don't know. It's like charades on steroids, and it's just fantastic. The triple round structure of it, where the words keep coming back time after time, and you develop within the context of a single game, like in-jokes that are just going to keep circling back around, is incredible. We also play this in a very weird way. We don't really play the out-of-the-box version anymore. We play this primarily using an app that our friend Dan developed, which basically sources stuff from like IMDb and very, very obscure stuff that no one's ever heard of. But that's part of the fun. Trying to describe things that no one could possibly ever have known or heard of, just seeing it on the app for the first time and thinking, how am I going to get this across to someone? But by the time you get to round 2, you've developed some sort of code for it, some sort of way to like get it across to your team. It's just so special, and it works every single time. Time's Up is incredible. I don't know that I'm as precious about the correct way to play this. Like, if you've played something like Monikers and love it, then great, good for you. Like, that's fantastic. I'm just glad more people are playing some version of Time's Up.
Dude, it's so different. You can skip as many times as you want. And so there are players who just skip through all the cards so that they know them and then guess them. Like, try hard the living out of it.
Yeah, that does
like,
sound
completely. It's terrible. Distasteful.
Repugnant.
But that is Time's Up, my 4th favorite game of all time.
It also just makes it more like trivia, because it's like, do you remember this song, or do you know like what musical I'm talking? Like, it makes it more closer to a trivia game. Sure. And again, it makes it kinder, because then people who are dumb are still able to participate.
Oh God. Okay, my fourth favorite game of all time was my fourth favorite game last year. This is sort of like the third in a series over the last couple of episodes. I would say it starts with Container, the next step being the Estates, and then finally we have my fourth favorite game of all time, which I think is the same sort of game, but better, Fresh Fish. This is my favorite Friedman Friese design. The thing that Fresh Fish shares with the Estates and Container that I love is the closed economy. The fact that every time you make a bid in Fresh Fish, the money that you're bidding goes to an opponent or goes to your opponents. But the thing I love the most about it is how simple the rule set is. You know, it's not a super straightforward game, but it's relatively simple, and yet it's so brutal. The goal in Fresh Fish is there are 4 stalls in this fairground, and their goal is to have your vendors as close to the source of these stalls as possible. So you've got cheese, and you've got ice cream, and you've got fish, and you've got something else, and they're sourced in 4 different spots around the board. You're trying to place your vendor as close as possible to the different places so you get the freshest products. But it's a 2-step process where at first you have to stake a claim to a spot, and then you have to buy the actual vendor itself and place it there. But the twist is, and the thing that makes Fresh Fish is that each part of the map can only hold a certain number of pieces. And once that number of pieces has been purchased and placed on the board, then all the claim markers that your opponents have placed get returned to them. And so they may have been banking on placing a vendor very close to the source, and then all of a sudden you place something on that spot and everybody's chips get spit back out off the board, and it can just be very brutal. There's a lot of like brinksmanship, a lot of like, this auction means a ton to me and I need to make sure that I win it, but I know that if I spend a lot to win it, I'm just giving money to my opponents, and maybe I can get around it. Maybe I don't need to win this auction because this spot is great, but maybe there's a way around it. Maybe I can like find another spot that's maybe not as close but going to be okay. And yet if you do that too many times, you can find yourself way, way far away from these places, and your scores get inflated where, you know, with Fresh Fish, you want to have as low a score as possible. I just love it. Again, Friese, much like Wallace, whenever he designs a game, you know they're always going to be novel. You know they're always going to have like interesting takes, fresh takes, you might say. And I think Fresh Fish is the best of Friese's designs and my favorite game of his, and my fourth favorite game of all time, Fresh Fish.
You don't even like sushi, Mark.
I love sushi.
Do you?
I do love sushi.
I didn't think...
The sushi we had in Vancouver, I remember, I'll never forget that.
That was great. I just think with your taste in coffee that I assumed you didn't like sushi. My fourth favorite board game of all time is Negotiation Incarnate. That is, I'm the boss, exclamation part on the boss. I'm the boss. I'm the boss, probably. That's how it's meant to be said. This is a game where you must come to a consensus with your friends. Someone is in charge of the deal, the art of the deal, as they say. And you need Mark and Neilan on the deal. You need Mark's green. You need Neilan's orange. And we're all going to split $15,000 million. And you have to decide in a way that's fair to everybody how that's going to go. But you're in charge of the deal. And so I'm going to say, well, I want 8. And you, Neilan, you can have 5 because you're not an Mark, you can have 2. You're lucky you're coming on this deal. And then I have to convince them that that deal is in fact the best deal for them. This is a old Sid Saxon game. This is out of favor with the common new board gamers. It is just negotiation. There's a little bit of dumbness in the way that the cards work, no question, a little bit of oldness. But when you get down to it, the round-to-round negotiations that happen in I'm the Boss is the best in class of negotiation. Sid Saxon, one of my favorite board game designers, and I'm the Boss. Just a crazy experience every time I pull it out.
My third favorite game of all time is the best in class in negotiation. Some might call it Negotiation Incarnate. In fact, Negotiation is the title of the game. This is Sidereal Confluence.
It doesn't even count as a negotiation game. Actually, that's a great thing, Neilan. Compared to them, like Sidereal isn't even a negotiation game.
I'm not going to come with you on that road. I will definitely acknowledge that there's more pure negotiation in I'm the Boss. But I think what Sidereal Confluence does trade for that is this idea of...
Euro game?
Yeah, exactly. This idea of building an economy, a personal economy, and requiring other people to fuel that economy. Like, you cannot exist in a vacuum in Sidereal Confluence. You have to find the people around the table that can provide you the resources you need to fuel your little Euro cube conversion engine. This also has really smart asymmetry in it, where each faction feels very, very flavorfully different, not just in the resources they require, but in special abilities they have that can sort of fuel and sort of hurt their own engine, and sort of having to work around them in order to grapple with what you have. There are so few games that really capture what I love about board games, like Sidereal Confluence is. Like, there are still 2 higher games on my list, but those are games I enjoy digitally. I can't imagine playing Sidereal Confluence except around a table and sort of having to get up over my seat, run across the other side of the table in order to like whisper in someone's ear about some sort of deal that we're going to try to get my engine working just as smoothly as I need it to. Absolutely love this game. It is a game that is definitely fueled by sort of being able to play it in a large context. Like, I've had now 2 8-player games of this in recent years that just cemented how much I adore it. And I haven't even touched the new expansion that's just come out. Really excited for that. That is Sidereal Confluence at number 3.
It's like there's a funny mirror here between us.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like we get along as humans, and yet
yeah, you have disparate taste. Yeah.
There's someone
no, but it's like, but there's a shared like feeling in the middle. It's just like Neilan is comforted by the structure and the engines and the Care Bearness. And again, I'm saying it in the Kellen way, but I'm being 100%.
No, I actually totally agree with you, even. Which was just kind of say, these 2 games get to the heart of what we love about board games, but here's the way to twist it to be a little bit more in Neilan's comfort zone, and here's the way to twist it again to more in Kellen's comfort zone. And I think that that's beautiful, that they both can exist at this spot on our lists while being very different from each other. Because like in the same ways that you don't love Sidereal Confluence, I don't love I'm the Boss, even though that they're capturing the same thing that we love about games.
My third favorite game of all time is what you might call a negotiation game. It could be called the greatest negotiation game, whatever you said. I don't know. No, it's not a negotiation game at all. Much like Brass and its designer Martin Wallace and Fresh Fish and its designer Friedman Friese, 2 designers known for very interesting twists and fresh takes on games. The designers of my number 3 favorite game of all time, which is up 11 spots, always design games that are unique and fresh. This is the Splotter Group. Kellen, can you give us a Splotter?
Splotter spelling?
Perfect. The folks from Splotter Spellen, this is one of their first big designs. For many people, the first worker placement game of all time. This is Bus. I've played Bus a number of times over the years, but I got a chance to play it again this year, and again, just absolutely loved it. What I love about Bus is that it's all on the table. There's no hidden information. Everything's clear. You are trying to ferry passengers around the city, but much like Dominant Species, the places where you place your workers is this fixed sideboard on the bus board where you know what the worker placement spots are at the beginning of the game. There's no adding worker placement spots. They're always the same. And you know that the order in which they'll trigger, and the order that they trigger is important to consider. And it's important to realize that the worker placement spots you place at the bottom of the board are influenced by who and where people place worker placement spots earlier in that sideboard. The Splotter twist to all this is that one of the worker placement spots is the time continuum controller or whatever, where you can stop time. So in this game, this very standard themed game about controlling bus routes and placing bus routes and ferrying passengers from home to work to the bar, there is this element where you can stop time. And if this action is triggered too many times, the game will end. But also, if you stop time, it can greatly change the way that points are scored round to round. And it's just a really interesting twist on route building and pick up and deliver and worker placement. A game that, again, from 1999, but feels fresh all these years later. There was a new publication by Capstone that really cleaned things up. But a game that speaks to me so much. Bus, my third favorite game of all time.
This is a double crossover with me as well. This was 49th on my list.
That's correct.
And yeah, this is my favorite Splotter. I think that delicious tension about when someone is going to trigger the space-time continuum thing and just completely derail everyone's plans. It's just riding over the entire worker placement phase in a way that just feels awful, but great.
And one thing I didn't mention that is crucial to this game is that the worker placement is unique because at the beginning of the game, you start with 20 workers, and that is your entire allotment. So any worker that you place on the board is a worker you'll never place again. So theoretically, in the first couple rounds, you could place all your workers and gain a big lead and then literally have no other workers to place. And that's just fantastic. And to your point about the time thing, the time control, when you place a worker on there, you're not compelled to actually take the action. So you can spend a worker, which again is a very finite, very important resource, place it on this time control and just use it as a threat. Use it as a, hey, I might activate it, I might not. And that can swing the way that other players take their actions. Just love that.
All right, my third favorite board game of all time is called Cthulhu Wars. Big caveat, this is a double crossover with Neilan. Big caveat is that it's hard to get. I would not recommend you kickstart this game. We're currently like 2 or 3 years behind on delivery, I think, of the latest batch of expansions for this. But Cthulhu Wars is my dudes on a map, area control game of choice that combines really crazy asymmetry with relatively straightforward comfort, nostalgia, gameplay a la Risk, where you're rolling a bunch of dice and fighting. I love how many different factions there are and how many different ways that they can score points. It is using this spellbook system, which allows you to have different builds even within the same monster. So you might be playing Mr. Cthulhu, but do you unlock this power for the early game, or do you unlock this power for the early game, or do you actually awaken Cthulhu as quickly as you can? There are different paths and different builds that make this game more than you might suspect, in a way that is, in my mind, kind of reminiscent to Scythe, how you might have early turn build orders for this faction or that faction and then ways to disrupt them. It's super fighty, super plasticky, super chaos. One that I hate Cthulhu as a theme. Literally, I detest Cthulhu as a theme, and it is my third favorite game of all time and occupies perhaps the biggest amount of space in my board game closet of any board game.
I actually think this is a triple crossover, I'm not mistaken, right?
It is a triple crossover.
Mistaken.
Yeah.
Triple crossover. We love Cthulhu Wars. Honestly, there's not a game that we could just play over and over again where I'm sure we could just spend a whole weekend with Christina screaming at us or standing by the table going, don't even think about it. When she gets so tense in this game, she's fidgeting, she just wants to kill you.
And this game has those moments where everybody's standing around waiting for a dice roll, waiting for the proverbial bucket of dice to be rolled, and just counting things up and seeing how it happens.
What a game.
My second favorite game of all time is another Vladik Vatil game, the second one in my top 10. A very, very different game from Pictomania. This is Through the Ages, a new story of civilization. This is my preferred flavor of civilization-themed game, at least in the board game realm. This is a game that's all about the cards. It is a huge tableau building game, but the crucial system in here is a card row. Not unlike the PAX games, you have this travelator of cards that are slowly getting cheaper, and finding the right time to grab them out of that row on your turn, spending crucial actions, the same actions that you're using to take a large majority of the actions you can take in the game, spending those actions in order to grab cards from the row and finding the optimal time to do that. Whether it's a vital card that there's just not enough for every single player in the game, and you don't want to be the only person left without it, or just something that so gels with the current state of your tableau that it's vital. That turning on the knife point of just thinking, I can't afford to wait for this to get cheaper because I know if I do that, Mark's going to snatch it up next turn. That's everything in Through the Ages. And you effectively, because of the way the game is structured, you get multiple opportunities to capitalize on, depending on what that resource is. If it's the way you get science, it could just be I could forego it now, but I will have to wait an age before I get another shot at it. There's so many sort of conflicting decisions at every single point in time about whether you grab a card. It is fiddly. It's a big, long game, maybe longer than it should be. Excellent digital implementation of this if you want to give it a bash. It's Through the Ages, a new story of civilization.
We got a chance to play this for the first time.
Yes, actually.
Digitally on BGA. And I really enjoyed it. We need to play it again, but I definitely had a really
It's on
good time
BGA?
playing it.
It is on
It's
BGA.
also, doesn't it have a nice app?
Yeah, the app is fantastic and still the best way to play it. I think Mark and I were just hey, let's just bash this on BGA.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we're going to return to it regularly, Mark, we should definitely do the app. One thing that was funny about that game, Mark, was I had warned you before the first game that there was probably going to be a big difference in our scores just by virtue of my experience with the game. But I did have this nagging worry in the back of my brain. It's oh my God, if Mark beats me on this. But thankfully, that did bear out. I did crush Mark at this. But I was
awesome.
eager to play another game with you because I could tell that you could see what it was that I see in that game.
Yeah. Definitely, for sure. All right. My second favorite game of all time is new to the list.
What?
Now, years ago, when we did our first implementation of this list, I don't remember where, but I had Caverna somewhere on there. Caverna quickly dropped off. It was off the next year. I should say, as an aside, I've played Caverna this year and have enjoyed it. It's not in my top 50. But what is in my top 50 and is actually my number 2 game of all time is Agricola.
Wow.
This is a triple crossover. I said in the past that I enjoyed playing Agricola before, but I was always playing with Agricola like experts and it just getting destroyed immediately and just had a bad experience. This year, I have sort of really dived into Agricola, whereas at one point, the cards, like the minor improvements and the occupations, felt like this incredible barrier that was keeping me back from playing the game. I decided to sort of embrace them. These are the cards that you can acquire, in my opinion, best through a draft with your opponents and can affect the way you play and the course you take. And diving into those and just learning all the different options and all the different combos that can arise from these occupation cards and these minor improvement cards has made this game like really, really bloom for me. And just all the different ways you can play the draft at the beginning, being like so crucial to plotting the way you think you're going to play and then trying to enact that in the game, but also knowing that you have to be able to also tactically shift if your spots are being taken, if, you're counting on the boar spot and people will jump ahead of you, and sacrificing a worker to guarantee you get the first pick of the next round. This is a game where the community was something I didn't really know about before diving into it. And just the amount of discussion about the Agricola cards and like the balancing of it and the number of cards, the number of like expansions that have been made for Agricola and all the possibilities that entails. And yet all those expansions, all those extra cards are all placed on top of like a very straightforward worker placement game that the base game without the cards you could teach and explain very, very simply. It just makes for such a rich experience. Like I've played this a number of times now in person and on BGA, and I just look forward to the Agricola draft, maybe more than any single part of any board game. I just love seeing all these different options. And the thing about the Agricola cards is they will give you very incremental bonuses. Like they're not giving you a huge advantage. They're giving you like one thing here or one thing there. They're very small. But this is a game where small advantages can mean a win, but also the way that you can combine one small advantage with another small advantage, and all of a sudden you have like a medium advantage. And now, can I make that medium advantage with another card a big advantage? Or can I slow play this card, not let my opponents know that this is what I'm going for? And then at the end, I play that occupation that gives me all these points. There's just a lot of ways to make these incremental, very small advantages into something grand. And I just love the way you feel like you're building. And also people have talked about the fact that at the end, you have this like lovely looking farm at the end. And that's something certainly you feel like you've built something. And I know that card play can put people off, and I've been there myself, but it's just such a rich tapestry of cards and possibilities. I just love when I start a new game of Agricola and just that draft feels like such a plethora of possibilities. Where am I going to go this time? What am I going to put together this time? So Agricola has gone from off my list to absolutely love, my second favorite game of all time, Agricola by Uwe Rosenberg.
It's funny, this is on my list in spite of the card play.
I was just going to say
the other part of the game
yeah.
is so good, right? Like just the straight worker placement is like mean, vicious. The end game scoring is mean and vicious. Feeding your workers is mean and vicious. Like every part of it is just solid that I can see if you really got into the card play of it. Like it would be like your lifestyle game, right? Like, what's happening in the F deck? Be wary of the Lancer when combined with the party, cauldron.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. You're exactly right. When you play, do you play with the cards are doled out and there's no draft, or do you play without the cards? Or
I typically play with the 10. And I think it's in the rule book, which is like you draw 10 and then discard down or something like that.
Right.
So it's a mini version of that. But I'd be happy to draft it in a like BGA environment. It's just the draft takes like 35 minutes live, or that's been my experience.
Right. Yes, that's for sure. For sure.
My second favorite board game of all time uses a dirty word, and that dirty word that might get you turned on or turned off is semi-co-op, and this is Archipelago. When I play board games, I'm looking for unique and novel experiences. Archipelago, a triple crossover on Neilan and Mark's list, I believe because you just can't get this experience anywhere else, is a heavy Euro game that has been combined with a semi-cooperative game. Someone might be working against you and you don't know it. The ability for this game to create tension and moments where you need everyone's consensus to move on. And if you don't, the game is literally over and no one wins, or maybe Neilan does and he's secretly betrayed you all, is unlike anything else. I've never felt, again, it's almost Survivor. I'm talking about reality shows here with diplomacy. Like Archipelago has that classic feeling of a game show like The Mole, where it's like, is someone actually working against us here? And it's a different flavor, a different aspect of that than you've ever gotten. And there's a weird social contract to even playing Archipelago because people are excited about the island. This is beautiful. Hexagons, you're building out this lush archipelago. You get a little engine going, you're all happy. And Mark is over here, he's going to end the game because he doesn't think he has enough pineapples to win it. And the game could end. And you have to be totally okay with that. This is a niche product for those who are okay with heavy Euro machinations and interested in maybe someone is a traitor. Maybe we'll negotiate this out. A lot of negotiation. Love Archipelago.
I have been joking repeatedly about adding games to our Dice Tower West list, but look, this is what we have to do. We have to get good night's sleep and just get up and play these games because I desperately want to play Archipelago again. We have to play Archipelago when we all get together. It's been way too long.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before, but this is the one. This is the game that we should absolutely all play again, in my opinion, at least. It's a game that's so hard to get played in any other context other than for people who love it, who are sort of willing to devote the time and the mental energy it takes because of just how that tension just underlines everything and that second guessing and that paranoia. And God, it's good.
Here it is.
My number one game of all time is A Feast for Odin. This is an Uwe Rosenberg game, obviously my favorite Uwe Rosenberg game. I love Agricola not as much as Mark, but I like Agricola plenty.
Factually, not as much as Mark.
But yeah, I do think that what Agricola offers in terms of that very tense worker placement, A Feast for Odin, much to a lot of people's chagrin, sort of gets away from. It sort of offers you a more stress-free sort of walk through this action board where there are so many different meandering paths of opportunities you can take. That's not to say that there is no tension in the game of A Feast for Odin, but that tension doesn't come from the worker placement board. It's more about a game of just building out your little weird Viking ecosystem in the unique way and trying to do it better than other players. I think that there is something that is so characteristic of what I love about board games that's so wholly captured by all of the things that A Feast for Odin has, whether it's kind of the weird polyomino building, sort of taking all these items and building them into your little economy grid, because as you spread out across the diagonal of this board, you're increasing your income, which is greasing the wheels of the ways you're going to be able to take actions and whether you're going to be able to use that silver that you're earning to sort of overcome the feast that you have to do every single turn. The sort of myriad of just options that A Feast for Odin presents you kind of gives you a different way to approach it every single time you play it. Whether you're going to go down the route of the Uwe animal breeding or pillaging or forging items, it's just so diverse in those options. There is something that is kind of sandboxy about it while sort of being a wholly Euro game, to the nth degree. One of the things I always want to clarify is that my preferred way to play A Feast for Odin at this point is with Norwegian's expansion. I do think that it only enhances the game. I think in some ways it actually tightens up the worker placement, which is, again, not something I thought was necessarily a problem with the base game, but it does make it a little bit more tense by varying it by player count a little bit, while also just offering new opportunities and new interesting paths while rebalancing a lot of the stuff. That is A Feast for Odin. Incredible game that I never get tired of playing.
So Mark's number 2, your number 1 is an Uwe game. I find that his games have an X factor to them that is the hardest to describe, where somehow it's all more fun or more enticing than what it looks like on paper. I don't know if you guys feel that way or if you could describe that back to me.
I think one of the ways that this is materialized for me is when people that are maybe outside the hobby or not super familiar with board games ask me what is my favorite game, and I sort of have to try to explain to them what A Feast for Odin is and why it's fun, and then you show it to them and they're just like, I don't get it. Yeah, I'm with you. I often have this when it comes to new Uwe games where I look at them just like, I don't know that I'm going to like this, but there is just something that is just so delightful about playing with all the pieces of it that is so charming to me.
I mean, for me, a lot of it is the pastoral theme and the art by Clemens Franz. When I think of, and this is even before it was my second favorite game of all time, when I think of like cozy board game feeling, when I want to get that warm feeling, the game that has always jumped to my mind, even when I didn't like it, was Agricola. Even like the Animeeples. My first plays of Agricola were always with the Animeeples. And, you know, at this point, I'll play Agricola with anything. I'll play Agricola with the old-fashioned cubes or the Animeeples or whatever. At this point, I've appreciated the game so much that I'll play whatever. But like the Animeeples, and again, the pastoral theme, it just feels so cozy. Like even the fact that you're buying hearths and you're buying fireplaces and it's this very cozy thing. And you've talked about like being the king of the boars and that you can stake your claim to being like one thing and really grow it and see the animals, even the animals multiply. Like it's just very cozy. I spoke about Hallertau when I played Hallertau, a game I don't really enjoy. But when I opened it and I saw all that green, all that Uwe green, and I knew that you were going to have like fields and you're going to have different types of materials you were going to try to harvest and stuff like that. Even the phrase harvest makes me feel very comfortable and very cozy and very homey.
Yeah, I think that nails it for me because it's the thing I think that even in the differences between our particular flavors of preferred Uwe, like the reason I like Odin, despite being a less harsh game by almost every measure than Agricola, say, is exactly that. It's comfort. It just fills me with joy just to be playing it.
You're always like acquiring things and they're always getting bigger. There's always improvement. You're building things. You're building fences to like harness these animals. Yeah. All right.
Mourning for what we aren't anymore, what we've lost in modern society.
That's right. The bygone days, the good old bygone days. All right. My number one game of all time, I'm not going to beat around the bush. It remains Biblios. I'm just going to share a couple of memories. I remember the first time I played this game. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I just feel like an appropriate time. I was looking for a game to bring to a game night with non-gaming friends. I had never played it, had Biblios on my shelf for maybe a year or something. Didn't think much of it. You know, this is a game with a monk on it. Looks like a book. What could be in there? Learned it. Even learning it, I thought, okay, this is going to be at least an easy game to teach that we can play while other people show up. And sat down and played it, and it just was like a revelation to me. Like all that game in such a small package, such small time, such a small footprint and rule set. And I was like, and I just, footprint. But I thought to myself, like, well, I'm the gamery guy here. These are my soccer friends. Did this mean anything to them? And they're like, can we play that again? And like, we played it again. And that it became a thing where we had planned to come out and play 3 or 4 games. And yet we spent the entire 2 hours playing Biblios over and over and over again. On our drive home, we talked about the different strategies, what people were doing. There was a friend of mine who was exceptionally good at it right off the bat, and I asked him, like, what were you doing? How are you pivoting? It completely engrossed me from the beginning. And then the other quick thing I'll say is that the first game I played here with the people I play here in Vegas, the first game I played, and this is sort of like them listening to podcasts, they wanted to play Biblios as the first game I played in Vegas. And again, it was just playing this game with people who I didn't know, who I've grown to know now, though. It's just like being able to immediately trash talk in the way I like trash talking with Biblios and knowing the different beats of it and knowing that I was going to be with these new people playing a set collection game, playing an auction game, playing like all these different games all in one little package. Just amazing experience. Just love it. I have thought to myself, is this whole thing a bit? Is this whole Biblios thing like blown out of proportion? And then I play it and then I realize it's not. Biblios still my favorite game of all time.
I enjoy For the King and Me, personally.
All right, it's time for the hammer.
Oh, it is time for the hammer. No, Biblios is a good game. Again, I don't. No knock.
I remember when I first when I first brought up Biblios, like loving Biblios, this was before we even ranked games. We were just first couple episodes or something, maybe even early in our friendship. And I said how much I like Biblios. And Kellen, you were saying that you remember playing Biblios with your brother, and you guys at the end, like talking to yourself, like asking, like, is that even a game? Like being perplexed as if it even qualified as a game. Wasn't there something like that? You guys hated it initially.
It is. It's like, I don't know how it popped for you. It's clean. It's very clean.
And it's certainly, to be clear, like it popped for me. Like that's one of the things.
No, yeah.
My first impression of Biblios was like I went in with no expectations and it ended up being like something that completely captured me. So that's a big part of it for sure.
It's like there's a little bit of like that classic card game, and it's almost like that, but it's a twist on that is so much more than that, you know? Like it's just like the family game, but then like it's got layers to it. So I have no shade for you. But I do have a better card game for you. The number one Hammer board game of all time comes to us from Mr. Carl Chudiak, who may not be as doctory as Dr. Finn, but certainly is probably a doctor of something. Innovation is the best board game of all time. And again, cards are greater than boards. And here we have it. We have it in Innovation. Mark talks about, oh, I love the cards in Agricola. Okay, well, what if that was the whole game, you idiot? Here it is. It's in Innovation, right? He's messing around racing for the galaxy when he could be playing Innovation, a story of civilization. Neilan is too busy doing that with Mr. Vlad Travolta, but you could be doing it with one classic Carl. This is a game of combos, a game of possibilities. It is all about discovery. It is about seeing how cards blend and how suddenly rocket science is working with monotheism to up your board. You have limited control of the rocket ship that is Innovation, but the fun, it's there. It's in the discovery. The joy for me of board gaming, specifically as it relates to like mechanisms, is a discovery. And Innovation feels like how I think about board gaming when I look for new games. It's always in Innovation. Like I play a new game of Innovation, I'm like, God, this card sucks. I hate this card. Why do I have this card? And then the next game of Innovation, oh, like, wow, like this is actually going to pair so well. And I'm so excited for the turn that I'm about to have. This is a game that Christina and I have played probably not hundreds of times, maybe hundreds of times, just over and over and over again. I get crushed when I play this online, which I love. I adore the fact that like I somehow have not cracked the code that is Innovation. It is wild. It is a crossover with Neilan, double crossover.
Yeah. Innovation's excellent. Like I think that exact feeling you described of just picking up a card, you know, because even though that you can get some familiarity with the cards there in the decks, it's always just like a pleasant surprise when you pick up a card like, this guy, and like and it just works with what you have, and it says you go from a position of thinking like, yeah, this is it, this is over, to that drawing this card and thinking like, hang on, I can like scrabble something out of this, and then you sort of like not necessarily crawl your way back, because nothing works like a crawl in Innovation. It just goes from like low to high to low to high in ways that feel fantastic.
Yep, Innovation. It's the greatest. Well, there are other greats, A Feast for Odin and For the King and Me, the three best Biblios. No, that is my number one, Innovation.
And that is going to do it for the annual list of the top 50 board games of all time. Of course, we want to hear what your top games are. We want to hear what you thought of our top games. You can do that in a number of ways. You can email us. We've been getting a lot of really interesting, cool emails from listeners recently at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can go to the forum, boardgamebarrage.com/guild, if you want to talk to us in a more long form way, or the most immediate way that you can talk to us and talk to a ton of other board game fans is to go to boardgamebarrage/discord, where we have a lively discussion basically 24/7, because we've got listeners around the world who are there talking and playing digital games together and talking about board games, talking about everything, talking about a bunch of different things. But I think that when this episode is released, we'll have a lively discussion about our top 10 games and their top 10 games. And so we would love to hear what your favorite games are. So please, I know it can be a little bit daunting for those who haven't joined Discord before. It was when I first joined it, but it's really basically a really fun chat room with a lot of incredibly welcoming folks. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're interested in talking to people about board games, go to boardgamebarrage.com/discord and join us and discuss your favorite games and our favorite games. But that's going to do it for the show. Thank you as always to Heart Society for our intro and outro song, What's on Your Mind, Kid? And until next week, goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You to save me from myself.
All right, let's clap it. 3, 2, 1. There you go. That's the clap of a top 10. All right, all set?
The order.
The order is, if I'm not mistaken, Neilan, Mark, Kellen.
Yeah.
All right, so
Neilan,
Kellen, you're going to be
Mark, Kellen.
You're in the prime spot. You're our number one boy.
I'm the hammer.
You're the hammer. That's right. That's right.
That's right.
I'm the wielder, and then Kellen or Neilan is Neilan is the hammer, and you're the nail. Maybe.
No.
Oh.
Do you know social deduction nomenclature, Mark? It seems that you don't.
What? Okay, what's the hammer?
The hammer is in a round of resistance when you have to accept their nomination because they're the fifth. It auto fails after the fifth.
Okay, so what's the
So
fourth?
The fifth player.
Who's the fourth guy?
The
Who's the
fourth
wielder?
guy is he wishes he was the hammer. So,
Okay, so Neilan is the wielder, and I'm the hammer manufacturer.
Right.
yeah.
There you go.
Well,
Okay, great.
I mean, I thought host of the top 10 was enough, but you
No,
you
I
need
need
a
to be
special
something more.
office.
Yeah.
We'll make you a little plaque that says
Please.
hammer manufacturer.
That's right. My dreams have come true. Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 260 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I said that weird. Let me do that again.
Yeah, there was a little bit
I
of
said that
Richard
like
in that.
Yeah, a little Simpson, little Richard Simpson-esque. Okay. Hello and welcome to episode 260. Tell us about your 10th favorite game of all
Now that's a good name for a plaque.
Flower?
First flower.
Yeah.
Floor.
I'm the hammer manufacturer. Neilan's the flower. First
I don't know,
Uh,
Neilan.
Hammer
Okay, Neilan, I have a
manufacturing.
joke. Neilan. You missed it, so I just wanted to tell you. Look at Mark. Okay, look at his bedroom.
Yeah.
See what he see all the games on his bed.
Uh-huh.
So just screenshot that, and then we just post it on Twitter, and the caption is just orgy.
Oh, okay.
See what I'm saying?
I get it. Okay, I can do that.
No, don't do that. I mean, I guess we could,
No, we probably shouldn't, I suppose.
but it's funny if you explain it like over and over again, and you interrupt people. I'm sorry. Please
No.
continue with
It's
your.
all good. Whatever I'm about to say.
No, that's not what I said. That's what you're saying.
Okay, my 10th favorite game of all time.
My 8th game of all time is down
Isn't it
3
me?
spots. Oh,
Mark, Neilan, Kellen.
no, it's Neilan, Mark, Kellen. Remember, you're the hammer.
It's not Neilan, Mark. It's Neilan, Mark, Kellen.
Neilan, Mark, Kellen.
I swear to God, this is not a joke.
Okay, no problem. My 8th favorite game of all time.